Watch this.
What's playing out on America's southern border is a crisis that eventually surfaces as a critical question in southern Idaho.
As far as I understand, every one of my workers is legal to be here.
What can be done about undocumented farm workers?
We all recognize the system is broken and we need to fix it.
But so far, D.C. hasn't been able to fix the dilemma facing Idaho farms.
Yeah, 90% of our workforce is foreign-born.
The problem isn't new, and neither is the solution.
But 90% of those people that I talk to, citizenship is not the big thing. They just want to work. And they're working in jobs that Americans won't fill.
And what about those who do fill those jobs?
Muchas de las veces los americanos, yo pienso que en veces nos detestan por estar aquí.
Even though Americans,
let's just deport them all because they came illegally,
rely on them to be here every day.
How much are you willing to pay for milk? How much are you willing to pay for any other commodity?
Today, we're taking a look at the latest attempt to fix immigration.
Politics aside, I'm tired of hearing the rhetoric.
And sustain an Idaho industry.
Our domestic workers, I feel like they deserve to be able to work in Idaho without living in fear if they're going to be deported.
Agriculture. It's still Idaho's #1 industry, the single largest source in the state's economy. It brings in 20% of the Gem State's gross revenue each year. And potatoes, those are only part of the story. We're talking wheat. That's one of the big deals, where Idaho's consistently one of the top producers in the country. Sugar beets, yep, we're #2 in that. Then it comes to, how about dairies? Idaho ranks 3rd when it comes to dairies, by the way, behind California and Wisconsin. Idaho dairies produce 13 billion gallons of milk every single year, and they're all over the place. You ever driven by a dairy or spent any time on a dairy? You've likely smelled it, I'm sure, as you've driven by, but you ever stopped and just kind of taken a tour? You recognize all the people who work these farms? Do you see them there? Family owned or otherwise, the overwhelming majority are staffed by people who are not from this country. Where do they come from? Well, nearly all come from the other side of our country's southern border. Back in July, just days after the end of another National Dairy Month, Idaho Congressman Mike Simpson, he tweeted out about something about his role in the reintroduction of the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. This is what he tweeted out back on July 8th, saying labor shortages in the ag industry create burdens for our farmers and our food supply. There's perhaps no more important facet of immigration reform for Idaho and its economy than providing a stable and secure ag workforce. Congressman Simpson called out anyone who doubts its importance by saying, just ask a farmer and a rancher. You'll learn labor is often their #1 concern. You'll notice the word reintroduce. That's what we use, the term reintroduce. It was used in reference to the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. That's because this bill was first introduced in 2019 and then again in 2021. Both times, it has gone nowhere. Included in this farm bill, by the way, an update to the H-2A program. It allows employers who have a hard time finding workers to bring in foreign workers to fill those spots. Problem is, it's only seasonal as it stands now, which may work for those who grow produce, because in Idaho, you only have a short window to harvest those things. But what about those year-round farmers like dairy farmers? They need year-round labor and a year-round visa program to make that possible. Here's Andrew Bartline.
The subtle breeze blowing over a scenic Idaho prairie rustles a myriad of maize. A seasonal sound so sweet.
I can't imagine raising my kids any other way than what I've done.
A homegrown nod toward the template of self-sustaining. Because the dairy, it's dependent daily, a year-round operation.
When you have a connection to the land or you have a connection to livestock, it's more than a job, it's a life.
One this Idaho farmer's fueled
and
for 3 generations.
There isn't a single job that I ask any of the guys to do that I or my dad or my son wouldn't do in their stead. I've used the same employees, the same family, the core of my group of employees I've had with me for over 20 years.
To protect his employees from any possible repercussions, we chose to keep this conversation anonymous.
I mean, in the 20 plus years that we have used the H-2A program, I have had one American applicant that has come to me for a job. And once they got on farm, they worked one day and never showed up again.
The H-2A program. Congress created it in 1986 as part of the Immigration Reform and Control Act. It's a seasonal work visa program for unfilled agriculture jobs, naturally posing a perpetual problem.
So with a dairy that's year-round, you need year-round employees. You can't have your guys going home the 15th of November and then not able to come back up until February or March. What do you do in the interim 4 months? It's untenable that way.
With a tenable solution in high demand.
We all recognize the system is broken and we need to fix it.
Idaho Congressman Mike Simpson spent years pitching answers.
If you're a dairyman or a cattle rancher, those cows need to be milked every day. It's not seasonal. I heard the other night 6,000 openings in the dairy industry, and they had 3 applicants that were Americans for those 6,000 jobs.
Is that in Idaho specifically?
Yeah. So I mean, it's a huge issue.
But drawing little interest in a solution. Out of sight, out of mind. But the Idaho Dairymen's Association has nothing to hide.
Yeah, 90% of our workforce is foreign born, and we're sitting without a visa program, so that's going to tell you a lot about the legal status of our average dairy worker.
Rick Nairbout's the IDA's CEO.
Yeah.
That's just the reality you guys are working through?
Yeah, and have been for 30 years.
Passed in '86, it's been untouched by Congress for decades. No updates, no changes, but not for a lack of trying.
We almost had it done on the omnibus last year, but we just couldn't get it across the finish line, so we're trying again this year.
Simpson calls his legislation the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. The bipartisan bill aims to provide documentation for the undocumented agriculture workers already in the states, to provide year-round visas for future H-2A agriculture workers, and for those who choose to provide a pathway toward citizenship.
So it would be probably, they tell me, 18 years before anybody would become citizens, but 90% of those people that I talk to, citizenship is not the big thing, they just want to work. And they're working in jobs that Americans won't fill.
I imagine there's some people that would disagree with that and say they came here illegally, I don't want them here anymore. Where you're coming at it from a standpoint of this is an important backbone to our workforce.
Absolutely, and if, you know, some people have said to me, well, let's just deport them all because they came illegally. Maybe you could do that, but if you could, how much are you willing to pay for milk? How much are you willing to pay for any other commodity? I'm talking huge increases in the cost.
But the barriers barring this bill are built at the border. Bad actors, traffickers, cartels, they're all contributing to the connotation of immigration.
And until you can control that border, you're going to have a tough time passing anything that has the word immigration attached to it. And that's unfortunate. That's the political environment that we're in.
Political to the point where the U.S. Senate hasn't even voted on Simpson's bill. The House passed it twice.
Can Idaho's dairy industry exist without undocumented workers?
No. Current state of play, without access to a visa program, we would not be able to milk cows and do the day-to-day business of dairy without the Hispanic workforce that's here today.
The very workforce Idaho's economy depends on every single day. The same workforce the U.S. immigration system refuses to accept.
As far as I understand, every one of my workers is legal to be here. We collect taxes on everybody that works for us. Those taxes are paid to the government. And if there's something wrong with the paperwork, that's on the government side for them to figure it out.
Don't ask, don't tell. It's not a problem unless you make it one.
They like to come to work and they like to go fish. And that's the two things that they do. They don't get in trouble, there's no problem with them. And then they go home, they finally have to have a touchback. And then they can't come back up. And they ask me, hey, can you bring me up through the H-2A? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I cannot.
A skilled worker taken from a local family business for seeing their own family back home.
Politics aside, I'm tired of hearing the rhetoric, you know.
The reality of 30 years, going just where the wind blows.
You talk to the left, and the left says it's the right. You talk to the right says it's the left. There's always a sticking point. That's the biggest problem with politics across the board. There is no common ground. Nobody wants to work together.
The H-2A program requires these dairy owners to provide free housing for their workers out here on a visa. And this proposed H-2A reform would offer federal funds for low interest rate loans to preserve and also build worker housing as well. Those who say, Brian, why won't Americans work these jobs? These are high paying jobs. They are. Up to $4,000 for some people with that owner we talked to. Entry level, $3,300. This is per month.
That's pretty good.
Well, they're working 60 hours a week. How many people do you know that want to work 60 a week?
And this isn't a case of them just choosing to hire somebody who's not documented because they could pay them less than an American worker, right?
They can't legally do that. You have to give preference to an American worker before you can go the H-2A route.
Okay, so this H-2A program that's in this new act, well, reintroduction of this act, is it just a perennial, like you've got free access back and forth?
Not necessarily. So it'd be like a 3-year visa, and then you have to do a touchback every 3 years. And then after 10 years, there's more of a clear path to a green card. So every 3 years, you'd go back home to Leon, Mexico, wherever it might be.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Andrew. All that was super interesting. 1 applicant in 20 years. That's amazing. Well, so of course, there's another side to this issue, right? And it's likely represented by the views expressed by State Senator Brian Lenny from Nampa. On October 5th, Senator Lenny tweeted this: "There are 3 ways for us, U.S. Ag, to replace illegal aliens. Hire Americans, invest in better tech, do both. There are 0 industries in the U.S. where a majority of workers are illegal aliens," he said. "There are no jobs Americans won't do," he said. Oh, really? Well, you just heard from a dairy farmer who's had 1 American apply for a job in 20 years. You just heard from the Dairy Association, who said 90% of their workforce is foreign-born. I have personally spoken to another dairy farmer who declined an on-camera interview because he employs 6 to 8 undocumented workers. So when I asked Senator Lenny to speak with us about this, about his October 5th tweet to replace, quote, illegal aliens, he responded like this: "You put quotes around illegal aliens, eh? Cheers." Cheers, he said. "Yeah, I did, because I was quoting your tweet. Do you think it was because the term illegal alien is a racist dog whistle? It's a term that's been abandoned by the Associated Press, the Library of Congress, and U.S. immigration enforcement agencies because it is dehumanizing? Because yes, it is all of those things." This is the same Senator Lenny, by the way, who refers to those in the LGBT community as homos. Anyway, Senator Lenny offered to conduct an interview by email, but we're a television station, a visual medium which relies on people putting themselves in front of the camera to tell their story. Things we would have liked to have asked Senator Lenny: did he speak to an actual Idaho farmer or a rancher before posting such things on social media? What background or ag expertise does Senator Lenny have to make such a statement? His bio says he's a direct response marketer, which is described as marketing designed to elicit an instant response, to get prospects to take a specific action. I think that means he gets people to click on stuff. We do know he seems to be a big fan of the AI image designator, the creator there, as you can see by his latest tweets on this topic. So instead of hearing his side of the issue, Senator Lenny chose to take a page out of the playbook of a certain section of Idaho's Republican Party and refuse an on-camera interview. Why face questions when you have a meaningful discussion, or when you can just garner clicks? Well, that covers a good portion of the players involved in the immigration reform issue. But what about the actual farm workers? And what about what you have to say? Text us at 208-321-5614. Don't forget to include your name and the hashtag #the208. Clean, concise, and constructive. We might share yours at the end of the show. Okay, so we've heard from an employer, a politician, and a lobbyist. What about the people doing the actual work? We're able to speak to a couple of farm workers under the condition we keep them anonymous. And they say their fear, well, that goes beyond being deported. It also comes with not being able to advocate for better working conditions, which, as you're about to hear, well, they're extreme. Brenda Rodriguez brings us their story.
It's harvest season, which means crops like sugar beets, potatoes, and onions are being pulled from the ground. This time of year, the daylight hours get shorter, but for those who work out here, the hours on the job remain just as long. For some farm workers,
Paramos y dice, okay,
it isn't your typical 8-hour shift.
agarren su break, 15 minutos. Es lo que nos dan.
Some days last 12 to 16 hours.
Pero para todo el día.
Sí,
Oh, wow.
sí.
It's a job only a few can take on.
Porque pues te bañas en sudor toda, porque ya aparte el polvo que sale te pica, a algunas personas les da alergia.
Mari is from Mexico. She's been living and working in Idaho for more than 15 years.
Y a veces pues te resbalas y te caes y pues te lastimas un pie o algo, pero pues a pesar de todo eso necesitamos trabajar.
Almost as long as Ana.
Me voy a la papa, que es la papa temprana.
It's been 2 decades since she left Mexico to work the fields in Idaho.
Es en la noche y pues también es de estarla limpiando, sacando basura, botes, papa podrida, todo eso.
The manual labor isn't the only working condition consideration.
Cada año están sacando químicas nuevas.
It's a health risk the Idaho Immigrant Resource Alliance says farm workers face from pesticide exposure.
So there's a lot of conditions which makes sense why there's some people who don't want to do that work.
Some people might mean those who live here legally.
De como tu posición, ¿hay americanos?
No, casi la mayoría es puro mexicano.
For many of them, it's the only way to make a living due to their immigration status.
Pues porque es en lo que podemos trabajar, porque si vas a una compañía tienes que estar legal para poder tener ese trabajo.
A status that also bleeds into the social aspect.
Muchas de las veces los americanos yo pienso que en veces nos detestan por estar aquí, pero pues yo pienso que uno de mexicano es el que saca más el trabajo y que de ahí también comen los americanos. Y muchos no nos quieren.
But not every farm worker is undocumented. Some come from other countries under the H-2A Temporary Agriculture Worker Program.
Me da gusto que vengan, porque mi papá siempre decía, el sol sale para todos.
But domestic farm workers feel like farmers are starting to favor those in the program.
Y a nosotros pues ya nos están dejando como a un lado.
Hemos estado ahí y ellos van y vienen y como quiera la preferencia es para ellos.
And Idaho Immigrant Resource Alliance and their sub-organization Visión 2C are taking notice.
A lot of times farm workers are seen as commodities and not human beings, so they're seeing the price tag instead of the actual human being that works behind that labor.
IDA's executive director, Irene Ruiz, says the goal is to help recognize the work that domestic workers do and to make sure that they are not forgotten.
They're the ones that are giving us, fuel in that economy, because a lot of the times H-2A workers end up going back to their countries of origin, and so they're taking, all of the monetary costs with them as well.
That's why IDA and Visión 2C are working year-round to help advocate for their working conditions.
And so I think it's crucial that we try to support farm workers in what we can to help alleviate some of those things that affect them.
And to help change the policy that Ruiz says isn't working.
We don't have rules and regulations. We have recommendations that come from OSHA.
And now farm workers' voices and concerns are being heard firsthand through Visión 2C's new story collection project.
My end goal is to get policy going to protect farm workers from heat, extreme heat, smoke inhalation, and pesticide poisoning. There needs to be a path to citizenship for our domestic workers. I feel like they deserve to be able to work in Idaho without living in fear if they're going to be deported.
And most of them simply asking.
Pues yo pienso que si nos hubieran más como humanos, pues sería mejor. Que tuviéramos derechos, algo así.
Because at the end of the day, working to provide a better future for their families is all many farm workers want, without the fear of being taken away from their loved ones.
Si hubiera una ley que apoyara a todas las personas que no estamos legalmente aquí, pues eso sería lo mejor del mundo.
Until that time comes, they'll go on working, finishing the harvest.
Somos importantes porque estamos ayudando para tener un alimento en la mesa para el mundo entero.
The Immigrant Resource Alliance says that providing legal status with a path to citizenship can help farm workers improve wages and prevent the exploitation of undocumented workers and also H-2A workers.
I was surprised to hear that not everybody's on the same page when it comes to farm workers on this issue.
Yeah, right. Well, what I did learn from here is there's H-2A workers and the domestic workers, right?
Sure.
So, and I've been around farm workers for all my life, really, and this is the first time I'm hearing that there's such a division, there's competition, and on top of that, I mean, you're adding all these different conditions that they're working in, so it's just adding there.
It's all right there. All right, thank you very much, Brenda. I really appreciate it. Okay, so what about these working conditions that Brenda touched on? The pesticide exposure, working in excessive temperatures, even access to clean drinking water. What about trying to survive while simultaneously trying to live in the shadows? Without year-round legal status as of now, who is helping these workers right now? As far as we know right now, the Idaho Immigrant Resource Alliance works with many organizations, including Community Council of Idaho, to provide other resources for farm workers like affordable housing and affordable health care through Community Family Clinic. Migrant and seasonal Head Start programs for children 0 to 5 years old to help the students learn in both English and in Spanish. They also provide immigration legal services through Familias Unidas, which helps farm workers who want to become citizens or renew their DACA at a low cost.
This legislation, it's really quite simple. It gives us legal status for the workers that are here today that have been working in agriculture. It gives us access to the H-2A program for the first time ever. And the trade-off for those two is, will EVerify our workforce going forward? So there's not the question of legal status in the ag workforce if you're going to utilize the programs.
Makes legal to work mandatory and almost instantaneous, this would. It's someone like Senator Brian Lenny supports. EVerify, something we have kind of touched on earlier in this show. It's part of the Illegal Immigration Reform Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996. That was when it was first introduced. Employers can take information like, say, a social security number, They can take it off an I-9 form, enter that electronically into a national database to see if those numbers match. The employer will know within a few seconds if that worker is legal to hire. 22 states use this system, including Idaho, but only for public sector jobs, state contractors and subcontractors. It's not required for private employers like farmers. With the updated H-2A program in Congressman Simpson's bill, EVerify would then be mandatory, and farmers, like the one we spoke with, would be fine with that. It's a cost he's willing to pay, he told us. It seems like what Rick Nairbaut called a win-win. But without the one win, the passage of a year-round visa program, well, the second win is sort of a loss. Because according to an American Farm Bureau study, an enforcement-only immigration reform like EVerify would cause a $60 billion drop in production, and it would cause food prices to jump 5 to 6%. First off, let me say thank you very much for your response and reaction to today's stories about immigration reform here in Idaho. So many comments, there's no way we could get to them all, but let's get to a couple before we wrap up today's show. Like this one here from Teresa in Boise. What visa category do sheep herders come with? Could the dairy workers use the same visa avenue? Well, the whole point is making this year-round, because right now it's just seasonal, which sheep herders generally are, kind of in the mountains during the summer. It's shameful that both nationally and within our state, legislature just wants to kick the immigration reform can down the road year after year. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Demand our legislature stop the insanity, says Lori. Finally, I'm guessing many of these Idaho farmers and ranchers are still voting Republican, the same party who voted against this legislation. We'll get to more later this week.